If you've ever been discarded by an avoidant, you probably noticed the profound lack of empathy that this person showed you when they abruptly ended the relationship. There was no care or concern for your shattered heart, and they were stone cold, almost like a dead look in the eyes. And even if they showed some emotion, that emotion didn't seem to be focused on you and the pain that you were experiencing. It was largely focused on themselves. And after that, they move on, distracting themselves, seemingly not having a care in the world, going on appearing to live their best life. And meanwhile, you're picking up the pieces of your shattered heart. Where's the empathy? Well, avoidance can absolutely struggle with empathy, especially if you're dealing with a dismissive avoidant or a fearful avoidant that leans heavily dismissive. There are some reasons for this. No, they aren't pathologically unable to experience empathy. They are not narcissists. It's an insecure attachment style. But due to their wounds, their insecurities, and the consistent childhood emotional neglect that they experience, empathy can be a challenge for them, especially when they are triggered. When you're dealing with an avoidant, you are dealing with a person that has a profound fear around vulnerability, a person that has a deep wound of shame, and that comes from that emotional neglect. They weren't given that love and nurturing that they needed as a child, and emotions were not safe to express in their home. Their feelings got rejected and dismissed. So they learned to bottle it up, but they also personalized that neglect, growing up to feel defective, unlovable, like there's something wrong with them. It's the wound of shame. And that wound of shame is why they struggle with vulnerability as well as accountability. The reason why they fear vulnerability, emotional closeness, and opening up is because of the fear of that shame being exposed. If I open up, if I get vulnerable, if I express myself and lower my walls, my partner's going to figure out that I'm defective and I'll get rejected. Accountability, taking ownership of wrongdoing or mistakes, is a healthy thing to do, but it's so hard for an avoidant because of that wound of shame. In their mind, admitting any wrongdoing is essentially the emotional equivalent of admitting that they're defective. I did this wrong. Look, it's proof I'm worthless. It's proof I'm a bad person. Too painful. So their insecurities get triggered. They detach from the relationship and they can abruptly end it with a blindsiding discard. You are in pain and they're showing you no emotion, because showing you emotion, accessing that empathy, would mean vulnerability. It would mean having to open up and actually consider the impact of their actions on you, empathize with you, which would mean they'd have to take accountability. And it would force them to confront that wound of shame and experience the shame for what they're putting you through. Experience the shame and the guilt of the way that they hurt you. That's too much shame. It's too much vulnerability. So the way that they cope with that is by blocking it off and suppressing the emotions, not allowing themselves to access those emotions or even access their feelings for their partner. They completely suppress it and then look to distract themselves so they don't have to reflect on the shame, the empathy, or any of that kind of painful, difficult, vulnerable emotions that come along with actually hurting somebody and breaking up and ending a relationship. They don't want to process that stuff. They want to suppress it so they don't have to experience it, because that's their coping mechanism, to not allow themselves to experience the emotions that come along with painful things such as breakups and the impact that their actions can have negatively on another person. It's difficult for them. It forces them to confront their shame. So rather than actually owning it, showing empathy, considering your feelings, they've learned to solely focus on themselves. And by solely focusing on themselves, they keep themselves safe and they try to avoid having anything to do with that inner shame wound. As a matter of fact, the entire avoidant attachment style, when it comes to dismissive avoidance especially, is oriented around shame, preventing that shame from being exposed and preventing themselves from confronting their own inner shame. It's all shame-based. Oh, and one more reason why they can also struggle to access empathy, especially when they're triggered. Oxytocin. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone, And human beings are naturally bonding creatures. Oxytocin bonds us to a partner. It helps bond us to children, to pets, family member, friends. But due to that consistent childhood emotional neglect, the avoidant, especially if they're dismissive avoidant, they weren't really exposed to oxytocin in a healthy way in childhood. They were not nurtured. So they have a limited oxytocin bonding capability and capacity. Well, oxytocin is also scientifically linked to empathy, and people with low oxytocin levels can experience low empathy. Now, avoidance, dismissive avoidance, they can learn to grow that capacity through therapy, changes in behavior, different ways of processing things. But until they do the work, that capacity to oxytocin bond can be limited, which can mean limited empathy as well.